Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Soviet experiment that revived dead organisms. Back in 1940, a Soviet scientist named Dr. Sergei Bryukhanenko did something that would make Dr. Frankenstein proud. He set out to bring dead things back to life, not in a shambling zombie movie way, but in a manner that was somehow even creepier. Bryukhanenko and his team built a machine they called the autojector. On the surface, it was a primitive heart-lung machine, designed to keep blood flowing and oxygenated. The real goal wasn't just to delay death, it was to reverse it. The experiments were as gruesome as they were groundbreaking. They would take dogs that had been clinically dead for several minutes, sometimes even draining them of all their blood, and hook them up to the autojector. The machine would pump a special solution back into the lifeless bodies, and after a few minutes, the heart would start to beat, and the dog would come back to life. But they didn't stop with whole bodies. In their most infamous experiments, they used severed dog heads, just the heads, completely separated from the body. They'd hook the arteries and veins up to the autojector, which would pump warm, oxygenated blood through the dead tissue, and then the heads would start showing signs of life. There is actual, grainy, black and white footage of these experiments. In one clip, a scientist taps a hammer on the table near a severed head, and its eyes and ears twitch. They shine a bright light in its eyes, and the pupils contract. They put a bit of citric acid on its nose, and it recoils, wrinkling its snout. The most disturbing part comes when they put a piece of cheese near its nose, and the dead dog's tongue emerges and starts trying to lick it. For a while, the Soviet government was thrilled. They showed a film of the experiments in the revival of organisms, to the Soviet Academy of Sciences. The West initially dismissed the footage as propaganda, but then, just as they were on the cusp of something, the whole project just disappeared into the notoriously deep Soviet archives. Why? Some say the results were simply too disturbing. Others believe the military took over, seeing the value in reviving soldiers on the battlefield. The darkest implication, and perhaps the real reason it was buried, was the realization of what they had stumbled upon. If you can keep a brain alive after death, what have you created? A consciousness trapped in a jar? The research was classified, and Bryukhanenko's work became a weird footnote. But here's the twist. Modern heart-lung machines used in open-heart surgery function on the very same principles he discovered while experimenting on severed heads. Number 9. The sound weapon of Dr. Gavreau. It's 1957, in a laboratory in Marseille, France. A scientist named Dr. Vladimir Gavreau and his team keep getting mysteriously sick. One moment they're fine, the next they're hit with headaches, blurred vision, and waves of nausea. But the weirdest symptom was a deep, primal feeling of dread, as if their bodies were screaming at them to run. Dr. Gavreau began investigating and found the culprit. An industrial ventilation fan was broken and spinning at just the right speed to create infrasound. Sound waves so low, below 20 hertz, that human ears can't detect them. But just because you can't hear something doesn't mean your body isn't feeling it. These powerful, invisible sound waves were vibrating at the same resonant frequency as their internal organs, literally rattling them like a washing machine on spin cycle. When Gavreau figured this out, he didn't think, "We need to fix this fan." He thought, "We could weaponize this." He realized he had accidentally created the perfect weapon, one that could incapacitate and terrorize people from a distance, without them ever knowing what hit them. So he built a series of acoustic cannons. His most famous was a giant whistle, 6 feet long, powered by compressed air. During one test, the weapon worked too well. They accidentally turned it on at full power inside the lab. The vibrations were so powerful they shattered windows, cracked walls, and gave the entire research team nosebleeds. Gavreau claimed that if they hadn't shut it down in seconds, it could have liquefied their organs. The French military got very interested very quickly. A weapon that can't be heard, passes through walls, and makes people feel pure terror while their insides shake apart? That's a military dream come true. And then, suddenly, all research on the project stopped. The papers disappeared. The funding dried up. The entire project was classified, and the research vanished into a secret government vault. The official story is that the weapon was impractical, but some think it worked too well and was deemed too inhumane even for war. Number 8. The Cancer-Zapping Ray Machine. It's 1934 in a clinic in San Diego. The man running it is Royal Raymond Rife, and he's built something that sounds like science fiction. A machine that could supposedly kill cancer cells using specific frequencies. Think of an opera singer shattering a wine glass with their voice, but instead of glass, it's a cancer cell. Rife claimed his universal microscope could identify the unique frequency of different diseases. Once found, his ray machine would blast the diseased cells with radio waves until they shattered, leaving healthy cells completely unharmed. It was a radical idea. In a now famous but controversial study from that era, 16 terminal cancer patients were reportedly treated with his machine. According to Rife's supporters, 14 of them were declared cancer-free after just 3 months of treatment. But you're not getting zapped by Rife machines today. The American Medical Association wasn't thrilled about a device that could potentially make expensive cancer treatments obsolete. They demanded more rigorous, independent proof, which was never satisfactorily provided. Then, a series of misfortunes struck. Rife's lab mysteriously caught fire. Key research papers vanished. The AMA officially condemned the technology, threatening to revoke the license of any doctor who used it. By the 1940s, Rife's machine and his reputation were officially buried. He ended up dying in poverty and obscurity in 1971. The original machines were destroyed, and his detailed notes conveniently disappeared. Were Rife's claims true? We may never know for sure, but the core idea that specific frequencies can affect cells is the basis for modern treatments like focused ultrasound, which is used to break up kidney stones and destroy tumors. Number 7. The indestructible plastic that vanished. Maurice Ward was a hairdresser from Yorkshire, England. In the 1980s, this guy who normally spent his days cutting hair invented something mind-blowing in his kitchen. He called it Starlight, and it could basically laugh in the face of a nuclear blast. The BBC tested this stuff on live TV. They coated an egg in Starlight and blasted it with a blowtorch that heated up to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to turn steel into a puddle. After several minutes under the flame, the egg was cracked open. It was completely raw. The Starlight had kept it so cool you could pick it up with your bare hands right after. Even more impressively, it was tested against a laser beam that could generate heat equal to 75,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The material barely got warm. NASA got interested. Boeing got interested. The British military got interested. Everyone wanted a piece of this miracle material that could revolutionize everything from space travel to firefighting. But Maurice was paranoid. He refused to let anyone analyze Starlight properly because he was terrified they would steal his formula, which he claimed was made of 21 common, non-toxic ingredients you could mix in a food processor. When companies offered him millions for the formula, he'd say no. He thought it was worth billions. Then in 2011, Maurice Ward died, and the secret of Starlight died with him. His family claims they have the formula, but no one has seen or been able to replicate Starlight since he passed. We had a material that could survive almost anything, cooked up in a kitchen by a hairdresser, and now it's gone. Number 6. The Dolphin communication project that got too weird. Back in the 1960s, a neuroscientist named John C. Lilly had a wild idea. He believed dolphins were super intelligent, with a complex language of their own, and that he could teach them to speak English. This caught the attention of NASA, who figured it might be a practice run for communicating with aliens. So, with government funding, Lilly set up one of the strangest experiments in scientific history. He created a facility on the island of St. Thomas, a house that was half flooded with seawater. A young research assistant named Margaret Howe Lovett was tasked to live there 24/7 with a young male dolphin named Peter. Her sole purpose was to teach him English. She would spend hours every day trying to get Peter to mimic human sounds. Surprisingly, he began making sounds that were less like dolphin clicks and more like garbled human speech. But then, the experiment took a very weird turn. As Peter spent all his time with Margaret, the adolescent dolphin became less interested in his lessons and more interested in her, becoming physically affectionate and possessive. Instead of stopping the experiment, the scientists saw this as a variable to control. In a bizarre entry in their logbook, they decided Margaret should manually relieve Peter's urges so he could focus on his lessons. This became part of their scientific protocol. As if that wasn't strange enough, John Lilly himself started experimenting with LSD, thinking it could break down the barriers between the human and dolphin mind. He began taking LSD and floating in isolation tanks with the dolphins. And yes, he also started giving LSD to the dolphins. When word got out about what was happening, the scientific community was horrified. The funding was cut, the project was shut down, and the research was buried. But the tragedy didn't end there. Peter was separated from Margaret and moved to a small, dark tank in Miami. A few weeks later, heartbroken and depressed, he sank to the bottom of his tank and stopped breathing. Dolphins must consciously choose to take every single breath, and it's believed Peter simply chose to stop. Number 5. The ray that kept food fresh for decades. In 1960, scientists at the U.S. Army's Natick labs found a way to keep food fresh for decades without freezing or chemicals. All it took was a specific type of radiation, a process called irradiation, that killed bacteria, mold, and insects without making the food itself radioactive. The results were astonishing. Strawberries stayed fresh for weeks. Bacon didn't spoil for months. They had bread from 1959 that was still soft and fresh in 1964. No mold, no staleness, just perfect food that tasted like it was made yesterday. The military was thrilled. They could finally give soldiers fresh food instead of sad canned meals. But when they tried to bring this to the public, the food industry freaked out. This technology would have threatened their massive canning and chemical preservative businesses. The public, meanwhile, heard the word radiation and immediately thought, nuclear apocalypse in my sandwich. The food companies stoked this fear, spreading rumors that the food was dangerous and funding studies designed to find problems. The scientists tried to explain the process was completely safe, even giving it the friendly name cold pasteurization, but it was too late. The damage was done. By 1968, the large-scale project was shut down and buried under a mountain of public fear and corporate lobbying. The technology still exists and is used to sterilize medical equipment and some spices, but that dream of having everyday food that never spoils is still sitting in a file cabinet somewhere in Massachusetts. Number 4. Forgotten anti-gravity technology. It's 1923, and a high school kid named Thomas Townsend Brown is messing around with X-ray tubes. He notices that when he powers them up, they move slightly. This small observation led him down a path of experimenting with high-voltage capacitors, basically sandwiching electricity between metal plates. He discovered that his devices produced a mysterious force. He claimed this force pushed against gravity itself. By the 1950s, Brown was building small, disc-shaped devices that he claimed could lift a portion of their own weight when charged with hundreds of thousands of volts. He called it the Biefeld-Brown effect. Aerospace companies and the military took notice. In the 1960s, companies like Martin Aircraft secretly researched something they called electrogravitics, and their internal documents specifically mentioned Brown's work. A technology that could reduce weight or inertia would revolutionize everything. Then suddenly, crickets. The military classified much of the research, and Brown's work became a footnote. Many mainstream scientists today dismiss the effect as nothing more than ionic wind, a known phenomenon where high voltage creates a flow of charged air particles producing a tiny amount of thrust, like a very inefficient fan. But others aren't so sure the effect can be entirely explained away. Aerospace companies still occasionally file patents that look suspiciously similar to Brown's original designs, so either the military spent decades classifying a really expensive fan, or there's something about Brown's discovery they really don't want us to know. Number 3. The doctor who could have saved thousands. Imagine you're a sailor in the 1700s. Your teeth are falling out, your gums are bleeding, and you're slowly, painfully, dying from a mysterious disease called scurvy. It was killing more sailors than battles and shipwrecks combined. In 1747, a Scottish doctor named James Lind figured out how to cure it. His experiment was simple and brilliant. He took 12 sick sailors and split them into pairs. Each pair received a different popular treatment of the day. Some got vinegar, others got seawater, and one lucky pair got oranges and lemons. The citrus group bounced back to health in less than a week. Meanwhile, the other sailors kept suffering. Lind had found the cure. He presented his groundbreaking discovery to the British Navy, who promptly said, "Nah, we're good." They ignored his findings for nearly 50 years. That's half a century of sailors rotting alive when the cure was sitting right there on their desk. Why? Lemons were expensive, and the admirals in charge thought they knew better. They kept trying their own cures, including making sailors drink diluted sulfuric acid. During those 50 years of stubborn ignorance, it's estimated that over 100,000 British sailors died from scurvy, all because some men in fancy wigs couldn't admit a simple ship's doctor was right. When the Navy finally did start issuing sailors daily rations of citrus juice in 1795, scurvy virtually disappeared from the fleet overnight. Number 2. The cure for cavities that was buried. In 2016, scientists at UCLA announced a discovery that should have changed dentistry forever. They had developed a peptide, a small protein, that could literally kill the specific bacteria, Streptococcus mutans, that causes cavities. Not just kill it temporarily like mouthwash does. This thing would completely wipe out the cavity-causing bacteria while leaving the good bacteria in your mouth alone. The peptide was called C16G2, and it worked like a smart bomb. The plan was to put it in a mouth rinse. One simple treatment could potentially eliminate the main cause of cavities for months, or even longer. Your teeth could have a chance to remineralize and rebuild themselves without the constant acid attacks. No drills, no fillings, no pain. The research was promising, and a company called C3Gian was formed to develop it, running clinical trials. Then, the research suddenly went quiet. The company stopped talking about it. Their website eventually disappeared. All those promising clinical trials just vanished from public view. What happened? The dental industry makes about $140 billion a year in the US alone, and a huge chunk of that comes from treating cavities. Imagine what would happen if suddenly nobody needed fillings anymore. It's hard not to wonder if a permanent solution to cavities was simply too good to be allowed to succeed. Number 1. The virus that hunts superbugs. In 1917, a self-taught scientist named Félix de Herelle was studying patients recovering from dysentery. He noticed something bizarre in their stool samples. There was an invisible agent in there, hunting down and killing the bacteria that caused the sickness. This mysterious bacteria hunter turned out to be a virus, but a special kind. This one only had a taste for bad bacteria and completely ignored human cells. De Herelle called these viruses bacteriophages, which literally means bacteria eaters. He soon began using these phages to treat people with bacterial infections, from dysentery to cholera, with amazing success. Phage therapy centers started popping up all over the world, but then penicillin was discovered. Antibiotics were a miracle, but they were also easier to standardize, easier to patent, and way more profitable for the burgeoning pharmaceutical companies. You can't easily patent a virus that you find in a river, but you can patent a new chemical you synthesize in a lab. So, phage therapy was buried. The Western world almost completely forgot about de Herelle's incredible discovery. Until now, the antibiotics we've been using for everything are starting to fail. Bacteria are evolving, creating superbugs that are resistant to everything we throw at them. But those bacteriophages we ignored for almost a century have been evolving right alongside the bacteria. They're nature's perfect answer to superbugs. Now that our miracle drugs are failing, scientists are desperately digging up de Herelle's buried discovery. Today, phage therapy is making a comeback as a last resort for patients with untreatable infections. We had a solution all along. We just buried it for 80 years because it wasn't profitable enough. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.